I'm Sloane Decker, 39 years old, and I spent 15 years building a career my own family refused to believe was real. For most of my life, I was the one at the bottom of the family scoreboard, the daughter who chose the quiet path, the sister who signed papers while everyone else did the real work, or so they all decided. But the afternoon, a Marine I had never met blocked me at the kennel and called me a civilian, while my own brother stood right there and said nothing. Something came up that aisle and made the truth impossible to ignore. Have you ever been underestimated by the very people who should have known you best? If so, tell me your story in the comments. You are not alone. Before I get into what happened, let me know where you're tuning in from. And if you have ever had to stand up for yourself after being written off, hit that like button and subscribe. The first lesson I ever learned about being a Marine, I learned at a kitchen table in a town that existed because of the base down the road. I was 10 years old, and my father was explaining the world the way he explained everything, with his hands flat on the table and his voice low enough that you leaned in to hear it. He said there was one job that mattered, and it was kicking down the door. Everything behind the door, he said, every radio, every map, every dog, every medic was somebody else's job. Important, sure, but not the job, not the real one. My brother Beau was 6 then, and he drank that down like it was water. He was the kind of boy who lined his plastic soldiers up, facing the same direction, and knocked them over one by one, making the sound of it with his mouth. I was the kind of girl who fed the stray that lived under our porch, even after my father told me it would only teach the animal to come back. It came back every night for 2 years. I considered that a victory. My father considered it proof I did not understand how the world worked. He was a rifleman, 22 years of it, 3 deployments, a body that ached when the weather turned, and a way of measuring people that never once turned in my direction with approval. I do not say that to make you feel sorry for me. I say it because you cannot understand the afternoon at the kennels, the one I am going to tell you about, without understanding the scoreboard I was raised under. In our house, there was a number next to everyone's name, and the number was how close you stood to the door when it came down. My father's number was high. Beau's number, even as a boy, was climbing. Mine sat at the bottom and did not move no matter what I did, because the things I was good at were the things he had already decided did not count. I enlisted at 18, the summer of 2004. I remember my father at the recruiting office, and I remember the exact moment his face changed when the recruiter walked me toward the support and military police tracks instead of the infantry. It was not disappointment, which would have at least been a feeling about me. It was something flatter. It was the look of a man confirming a thing he had always suspected. Beau, 14 and standing by the window, said he was going to be a grunt, a real one, and my father put his hand on the back of Beau's neck the way you do with a son you are proud of. And that was the whole conversation about my future, finished before it began. What none of them understood, what I did not fully understand myself until later, was that I had found the one place where I was not at the bottom of anyone's scoreboard. I found it in the kennels. I will not pretend I knew it the first day. The first day I got knocked flat by a green dog who outweighed reason and had opinions about strangers. But there was a gunnery sergeant named Cyrus Ferraro who ran those kennels like a cathedral, and he watched me get up and try again and not flinch, and something in him decided I was worth teaching. He paired me with an older handler, a woman named Paula Linden, who had been working dogs since before I could walk and who did not care even a little about my father's scoreboard. Paula taught me that a dog does not lie. A dog does not care what your last name is or how close you stood to the door. A dog reads exactly who you are, in your hands and your breath and the steadiness underneath your voice. And it decides about you in seconds, and it is almost never wrong. For the first time in my life, I was being read correctly. The dogs knew I was patient. They knew I would not quit on them. They knew, somehow, the thing my own family could not see, which was that there was steel in me, just a different kind than the kind that kicks down doors. By the time I made sergeant in 2010 and went on my first combat tour as a handler, the kennel was the only place on earth I felt like the truest version of myself. I came home from that tour, changed in the way everyone comes home changed, and my father asked me exactly one question about it, which was whether I had ever fired my weapon, and when I said no, he nodded like the scoreboard had been confirmed again, and we did not speak of it further. I want to be fair to him even now. He was not a cruel man. He was a narrow one. He had been handed a single measurement of worth by his own father and his own war, and he never thought to question whether the ruler might be too short. The tragedy was not that he hated me. The tragedy was that he genuinely could not see me. And so the love he did have for me had nowhere to land, and it curdled into that flat, patient disappointment that followed me out the door every time I left home. I tell you all of this from the front seat of my truck because that is where I was when this story really begins. Driving toward a base I had been assigned to lead at in early spring of this year, 2026. I was 39 years old. I had spent 15 years climbing a ladder my family did not believe was real, and I had reached a rung that should have ended the argument forever. But the thing about a scoreboard you are raised under is that you carry it inside you long after you leave the house. And some quiet, tired part of me was still driving toward that base, hoping, against all the evidence of my own life, that this time the number next to my name might finally change. I did not yet know that the one who would change it had 4 legs, a coat the color of dark honey, and a scar on his flank that matched the one on my leg. The kennels were at the far edge of the base, the way they always are, downwind and out of the way. I could see them from the gate, low buildings and chain link runs catching the late afternoon light, and my chest did the thing it always does near working dogs, a loosening, a coming home. I had no idea who was waiting in those runs. If I had known, I am not sure I could have driven the last quarter mile. I parked, and I sat for a second with my hands on the wheel, a civilian-clothed stranger in jeans and a ball cap, and then I got out and walked toward the only place that had ever read me right. By the time I was assigned to that base, Bo and I had reached the kind of distance that does not announce itself. There was no fight, no slammed door, no moment you could point to. There was just a slow, polite drifting, the way 2 boats tied to the same dock will still grind against each other in a current until somebody lets out the line. We let out the line over years. The warning signs looking back were never loud. They never are. They were small enough each time that calling them out would have made me the dramatic one, the sensitive one, the sister who could not take a joke. So I took the joke. I took a lot of jokes. The first one that left a mark came in 2014, when I commissioned. I had spent 2 years earning my way into the Marine Enlisted Commissioning Education Program, 2 years of school on top of everything else, and I pinned on the gold bars of a second lieutenant in a ceremony my brother attended in his dress uniform, sitting in the 3rd row. Afterward, at the small lunch we had, he raised a glass and called it, with a grin, the easy way to get bars. He meant it as a joke. Everyone laughed, including me, because that is what you do. But I watched my mother nod along, watched an uncle chuckle, and I understood that the story of my commission had already been written by the family before I even had the chance to tell it. I had not earned anything. I had found a shortcut. Officers like me, Bo said later that same afternoon, sign the papers. Marines like him do the work. That line stayed with me for years because it was so clean. Officers sign the papers, Marines do the work. It was my father's scoreboard, translated into a single sentence, and my brother carried it now like a torch he had been handed at the funeral. Except my father was not even dead yet at that point. He would be later. The scoreboard would outlive him. Through the back half of that decade, the gatherings developed a rhythm. I would come home on leave, and there would be a few minutes of warmth, and then the conversation would find its way to the things Bo had done, the workups, the deployments, the war stories that got a little bigger each telling. And I would sit there with a career I literally could not describe, because the work had become classified, the kind of work where you cannot tell your own mother what you did last Tuesday. So I said nothing, and my silence got read the way silence always gets read in a family like mine, as the absence of anything worth saying. Bo filled the room. I let him. It was easier than the alternative, which was trying to explain that the quiet woman at the end of the table had spent the spring planning operations that men like my brother would never be cleared to read about. There was a phone call in 2019 that I think about more than I should. Bo called me, friendly, easy, and asked if I could put in a word for him with someone, some assignment he wanted because, he said, "You've got the rank, right? You know people." He assumed my rank was decorative. He assumed it was a door I could open for him, a favor I could do, the one useful thing about a sister who signed papers. I told him it did not work like that I would not pull a string even if I could, and he got quiet, and then later that same night I heard from a cousin that Bo had been at a cookout telling everyone his sister had gotten too important to help her own brother. too important. As if the importance were a costume I had put on to look down at them. I had spent my whole life being told I was nothing, and the first time anyone in my family suggested I might be something, it was an accusation. I called Paula Linden after that one. By then she had retired, a gunnery sergeant with 30 years and a house full of old dogs, and she was the one person who had watched my whole arc and understood every part of it. I told her the story and she let me finish, and then she said the thing I have repeated to myself 1,000 times since. She said, "You do not owe anybody the story of who you are. The ones who need to know," she said, "know. And the ones who do not know are not the ones whose opinion should be steering your life." It sounds simple written down. It did not feel simple. It felt like being handed permission I had been waiting 15 years for. So I stopped. Not all at once, but I stopped. I stopped explaining myself at gatherings. I stopped flinching at the jokes, stopped supplying the laugh that smoothed them over. I let the silences sit. I figured out that a silence I chose was a different thing entirely from a silence I was shamed into, even if they looked the same from the outside. I decided, somewhere in there, that I was done auditioning for my own family, done performing humility to make my success more comfortable for the people who had bet against it. I would do my work, and the work would be the answer, and if they never saw it, that would be their loss to carry, not mine. I believed that. I had built a whole interior life on believing that. And I want to be honest with you, because this story does not work if I am not. That the belief had a crack in it, a hairline fracture I could not quite seal, and the crack was this. Some part of me still wanted them to know. Still wanted Bo, just once, to see the real thing and not be able to look away. Not to apologize, just to see. I told myself I had let that go. I had not let it go. I had only buried it deep enough that I could pretend. And the universe, which has a sense of humor I have learned to respect, was about to dig it up in front of an audience, using a dog I thought I would never see again. I drove onto that base a day early, off duty, in no mood for ceremony. My formal check-in was the next morning, but I have never been able to walk past a kennel without going in. And so on that first afternoon, still in my jeans and my ball cap, I parked and walked toward the runs to meet the dogs I would be responsible for. I told myself it was professional, getting the lay of the place before I took command. It was not professional. It was the oldest pull I have. I just wanted to see the dogs. The kennels sat at the back of the lot, and the runs ran along the rear wall where a row of high windows let the afternoon light come down in long, dusty bars across the concrete. It was beautiful, honestly, in the way working spaces sometimes are when no one is trying to make them beautiful. I stood for a moment just inside, letting my eyes adjust, breathing in the smell that means home to me, straw and disinfectant and warm dog. There were maybe a dozen runs, and the dogs came to the front of them as I passed, some barking, some silent and assessing, all of them reading me the way dogs do. I was reading them back. I was 3 runs deep, completely happy, when a voice behind me said, sharp and young, that I needed to stop right there. I turned around. The Marine was maybe 23, a corporal by the chevrons on his collar, lean and squared away in his camouflage utilities with the careful seriousness of someone fairly new to authority. His name tape read, Marsh. He had the posture of a man who had been told to take the kennel seriously, and had decided to take it very seriously indeed. Behind him, near the door, 2 more Marines had stopped to watch, and one of them, I realized with a small lurch, was my brother. Bo was in uniform, a staff sergeant now, broad through the shoulders in the way he had always wanted to be, and he was looking at me with an expression I knew instantly. The one from 100 kitchen tables, the one that meant he had decided what I was before I opened my mouth. He recognized me. I saw him recognize me. And then I watched him do the thing that would matter more than anything, the young corporal said. I watched my brother look at the ground. "Ma'am," the corporal said, stepping toward me, "civilians can't be back here." I want to be precise about what happened next because it happened fast and it happened in an order that I have replayed many times. The corporal, whose name I now know is Cody Marsh and who I have come to respect a great deal, was not wrong to stop me. He did not know me. I was a stranger in civilian clothes standing among military working dogs that could kill a person, and his whole job in that moment was to protect the kennel and the animals in it. He was doing it right. I opened my mouth to explain, calmly, who I was, and I never got the chance, because down at the far end of the runs, in the longest bar of afternoon light, a dog who had been lying in a downstay lifted his head. I did not see him at first. I heard him. I heard the scrape of nails on concrete, fast, and a sound I had not heard in years and would have known in my sleep, a high, broken whine climbing out of a chest built for silence. And then he was moving, a dark honey blur coming up the row of runs, and the corporal turned and said his name in a tone of pure disbelief, said Argo. Stay, in the voice you use when the floor is dropping out from under your training. The dog did not stay. The dog hit the gate of his run, and it was latched, and he went up and over it in a way that told me his handler had never once seen him do such a thing. And then there were no more barriers between us, and 7 years collapsed into nothing at all. Argo. It was Argo. I would tell you my knees went weak, but that is not quite it. It was more like the ground became uncertain, like the whole base tilted a few degrees. Because the dog running toward me up that aisle of light was the dog I had last seen being loaded onto a different aircraft than mine. Both of us bandaged, both of us alive only because of him. He covered the last 10 feet and did not jump on me, because that was not his training and not who he was. He did something stranger and far more deliberate. He planted himself directly in front of me between my body and the corporal, and he turned to face the young Marine, and he lowered his head, and from somewhere deep in his chest came a growl I felt in my own sternum. The corporal froze. I watched the color leave his face. A certified patrol dog does not break a stay, does not scale a gate, and does not, under any circumstances, place his body between his handler and a stranger and warn his handler off. It is the opposite of everything he is built and trained to do. Cody Marsh had spent his whole short career learning that this dog was a weapon he controlled, and in the space of 4 seconds, the dog had rewritten that understanding in front of him. He took 1 step toward me, more confusion than aggression, his hand coming up to take my arm and move me back, and Argo's growl climbed and his lips peeled off his teeth. And the corporal stopped where he stood, because some animal part of his brain understood what the dog was telling him. He never does that, Cody said, and his voice had gone thin and young. He has never done that. Ma'am, who are you? I did not get to answer. From behind the Marines, around the corner of the kennel office, came a man I had not seen in more than a decade. Heavier now, gray at the temples, with the rolling walk of a senior enlisted Marine who has spent 30 years on concrete floors. Master Gunnery Sergeant Cyrus Ferraro stopped dead when he saw me. For 1 long second, his face did nothing at all. And then it did everything at once, recognition and disbelief, and something that looked almost like joy. And he came to attention so sharply that the 2 younger Marines flinched. Attention, he said, and it was not loud, but it did not need to be. This is Major Decker, your incoming officer in charge. She reports for command tomorrow morning. He let that land. Then he looked at the dog still pressed against my legs, and his voice changed, went rough at the edges. And that animal you cannot explain, Marsh, the one breaking every protocol he has, he's the reason the Major is standing here at all. He carried her out of a kill zone on 3 good legs, 7 years ago. I read the report myself. The kennel went silent, except for the dogs, who had picked up the charge in the air and gone still in their runs. Cody Marsh snapped to attention. And my brother who had looked at the ground when a stranger called me a civilian, came to attention too. Slowly, like a man moving under water, and stared at me with an expression I had waited my entire life to see and discovered, in the moment it finally arrived, that I no longer needed. I knelt down. I did not care about the concrete, or the audience, or the rank I was supposed to be carrying. I went down onto the floor of that kennel, and Argo turned away from the corporal and pushed his whole head into my chest, and 7 years fell away. And the dog who saved my life leaned into me like no time had passed at all. I put my arms around his neck and felt the old, familiar weight of him and the new gray on his muzzle, and I breathed him in, and somewhere above me, my brother was standing at attention, and I was not thinking about my brother. I was thinking about the dog. For once in my life, in front of my family, I was thinking about the right thing. I held him for a long moment, and then I remembered where I was, and I stood up. There is a discipline to command, and part of that discipline is not letting your own reunion freeze a room full of Marines who are standing rigid, waiting to find out whether they are in trouble. So I found my voice, the steady one, the one the dogs taught me. At ease, I said. All of you. They came off attention, but the air did not settle. Cody Marsh was still pale, and now that the fear had drained out of him, it was being replaced by something worse for a young Marine, which is mortification. He started to speak, started to say that he should have, and I held up a hand, because I have been the young person who got something wrong in front of everyone, and I know that the kindest thing you can do is to not let them dig the hole any deeper. Corporal, I said, you did your job. You found a stranger in civilian clothes standing among military working dogs, and you moved to protect the kennel. That is exactly what I would want my handler to do. Do you understand me? You did nothing wrong this afternoon. He did not believe me, not yet. But he heard me, and his shoulders came down a fraction, and I made a note, somewhere in the back of my mind, that this was a Marine who cared enough to be mortified, which is the kind you can build something with. Then I knelt again and ran my hand down Argo's flank, along his ribs, until my fingers found what I was looking for. The seam of scar tissue where the fur grew back wrong, a ridge under his coat the length of my hand. He leaned into the touch. I knew that scar. I had a matching one, lower on my own left leg, that ached when the weather turned, the same way my father's old wounds had ached. Which is a piece of irony I have decided to find funny rather than bitter. Let me tell you about the scar, because you cannot understand the rest of it otherwise. It was the spring of 2021. I was a captain by then, 35 years old, leading a small security detachment on a deployment I am still not at liberty to describe in any detail. Argo was attached to us, 2 years old, in his first real downrange rotation, paired with a handler who got rotated home early on emergency leave, which left the dog working with the rest of us in the loose, improvised way these things sometimes go. I was not his handler. I want to be clear about that because it makes what he did stranger and, to me, more meaningful. I was just the officer he worked near. We were not bonded the way a dog and his handler are bonded. We were colleagues, if a dog can have a colleague. On the worst afternoon of my life, we were moving along a road we had moved along a dozen times, and Argo stopped. He stopped and he would not go forward, and he looked at a culvert under the road and back at us, and the handler who should have read him was 8,000 miles away, but I had spent 10 years in kennels, and I knew what a dog looks like when he has found the thing he was trained to find. I called the halt. I was reaching for the radio when the world came apart anyway, because the device was not in the culvert, it was beside it, and it was command detonated, which means a human being was watching us and chose the moment. I do not remember the sound. People say you do not, and it is true. I remember being on the ground and not understanding why, and I remember not being able to make my left leg do anything. And I remember the gunfire starting, the secondary ambush, the part that is designed to kill the people the blast only wounded. And I remember Argo. He came out of the dust with his own flank torn open, shrapnel in him, and he did not run away, which every instinct an animal has would tell him to do. He clamped down on the drag handle of my plate carrier, the strap across the back of my armor, and he pulled. 70 pounds of wounded dog, pulling a grown woman in full kit across open ground while people shot at both of us. He got me into the lee of the wrecked vehicle, into cover, and he lay down across my chest, and he stayed there, bleeding into my uniform until the others fought through to us. He carried me out on 3 good legs and a prayer. Cyrus Ferraro used those exact words this afternoon because they are the words in the report. And the words in the report are mine, because I wrote the recommendation that got that dog his commendation, lying in a hospital bed with my leg held together by hardware, weeping in a way I have only ever wept that one time. They patched us both up. They saved my leg. They saved his. And then the machine of the military did what it does, and the dog went one way and I went another, and I told myself I would track him down when I had the time, and the years went by the way they do, and I never did. I carried the dead instead. You carry a thing like that. It does not get lighter, you just get stronger around it. And now here he was, gray at the muzzle, leaning into my hand at the back of a kennel in the afternoon light. And I understood that the universe had not arranged this for my brother's benefit or for my vindication. It had arranged it for the dog and for me. Everything else was just witnesses. Bo approached while I was still kneeling, I heard him before I saw him. The careful boots, the throat cleared twice. I stood up to meet him because I was not going to have this conversation from the floor. He looked wrecked, honestly. Whatever he had been carrying for 15 years about who I was had just been detonated as thoroughly as that road, and he did not have the first idea what to say, and what he landed on was small and true and completely inadequate. I didn't know, he said. Sloan, I didn't know any of it. No, I said, you didn't. And I left it there, because I had a unit to take over in the morning and a dog at my knee and no interest, in that moment, in absolving my brother of 15 years in the 30 seconds he had clearly decided would be convenient for him. I was not cruel about it, I just did not rush to make it easy. That is a thing I have learned to allow myself. That night, in the empty quarters they had assigned me, I called Paula Linden. It was late where she was, but she answered the way she always answers, like she had been waiting, and I told her the whole thing. The runs, the light, the corporal, the gate Argo went over, the growl, Cyrus calling the room to attention, Bo looking at the ground and then looking at me. She was quiet for a while. Then she laughed, soft, and she said that of course it was a dog. Of course, she said, after everything, after every word you ever said that they did not believe. The one who finally made your own brother stand up straight was a dog who could not say a single word at all. I did not sleep much. I lay in that strange bed, and I felt the old ache in my leg, the weather turning somewhere. And I thought about the way Argo had put his body between me and the corporal. Not because the corporal was a threat. The corporal was a good Marine doing his job. Argo did it because that is the deal he and I made on a road 7 years ago, a deal neither of us ever spoke out loud. The deal that says I will stand between you and the thing that is coming, and I felt the decision forming in me before I had words for it. The way weather forms, the way a dog knows the culvert is wrong before anyone tells him. I just did not know yet what shape the decision would take. I took command the next morning. There is a ceremony to it, brief and bloodless, a few signatures and a handshake and a passing of responsibility from one officer to another, and the officer handing me the section was a lieutenant colonel named Adrian Pope. She had run the kennels for 2 years, and she was moving up and on, and she was the kind of officer the Corps does not make enough of. Sharp and unsentimental and genuinely good. She had heard about the previous afternoon. Of course she had. A story like that crosses a base before the coffee is cold. She walked me through the spaces, the runs, the training yard, the medical room, the office, and the whole time she was watching how I moved through it. The way good leaders watch the people they hand things to. At the end, she stopped me by the door and she said something I have kept. You could have buried that kid yesterday, she said. Corporal Marsh, you had every reason and a full audience. A lot of officers would have. They would have made an example, made themselves look big off a 23-year-old's worst afternoon. She looked at me. You told him he did his job. I asked around. That is exactly what you said. That is the officer I am handing my dogs to. Don't make me regret it, Major. You won't, I said, and I meant it. I held my first formation with the section that afternoon. 12 handlers and the kennel staff, standing in the training yard in the same long light that had lit the runs the day before. I am not a long speech officer. I told them 3 things. I told them who I was, where I came from, that I had started in kennels like these as a sergeant before any of them were old enough to enlist. I told them about Argo, plainly, the whole of it, because there is no point pretending the base does not already know, and because the dog deserved to have his service named out loud. And then I told them the standard, the only one that has ever mattered to me, the one Paula taught me 20 years ago. In my kennel, I said, you respect the dog and you respect the handler before you ever know the rank. A dog does not lie about who you are, and neither will I. If you are good to these animals and good to each other and honest about your work, you and I will get along fine. If you are not, no rank, no name, no story will save you. Are we clear? We were clear. I dismissed them, and I watched them break and head for the runs, and I caught Cody Marsh hanging back at the edge, and I knew there was a second conversation coming, the one between me and my brother, and I knew I could not put it off forever. Bo found me that evening at the fence line. He had clearly rehearsed, and the rehearsal fell apart the moment he opened his mouth, which I respected more than a smooth speech would have. He said again that he had not known about the deployment, about any of it. And this time I did not just leave it there, because leaving it there the first time had been about protecting myself in a hard moment, and now I had the footing to say the true thing. "You didn't know because you never asked, Bo," I said. 15 years. You never once asked me a real question about my work. You decided what I was when I was 18 years old, and a recruiter pointed me at a different desk than the one you wanted, and you never updated it. Not when I commissioned, not when I deployed, not ever. So no, you didn't know. But that's not the same as it being hidden from you. I let out a breath. I am not telling you this to make you feel terrible. I am telling you because I am done pretending it didn't happen, and I am done shrinking so the rest of you could feel taller. I don't need your approval anymore. I genuinely don't, but I will not stand in another kennel and have you look at the ground while someone decides I'm nobody. Not ever again. He took it. To his credit, he took all of it, standing there, and he did not argue, and he did not make it about himself, which for my brother was a kind of growth I had not known he was capable of. He just nodded, and his eyes were wet, and he said, "Okay. Just okay." And then he said he was sorry. And for the first time in our entire lives, it did not sound like a word he was using to end an uncomfortable conversation. It sounded like a door opening. The family found out, of course. These things travel. My mother called within the week, and I could hear the old machinery in her voice, the apparatus that had spent 4 decades fitting me into the slot at the bottom of the scoreboard, working hard now to fit this new information into the old story. She said she had always known I was doing something important. She had not. She said they were all so proud. The word landed strangely, because pride is supposed to be a thing you feel watching someone become who they are, not a thing you reach for after the fact when the evidence becomes impossible to ignore. I was kind to her. I did not perform the gratitude she was fishing for, and I did not punish her either. I just declined, gently, to pick up the script she was holding out. I had put that script down on a road 7 years ago, and I was not picking it back up for anyone. The thing nobody tells you about a moment like the one in the kennel is that the moment is not the change. The moment is just the place where the change becomes visible. The real work happens after, in the 100 ordinary mornings when no one is watching and there is no dog scaling a gate to make the point for you. Bo did something in the weeks that followed that I did not expect. He went and found the report. Not the classified parts, those were closed to him, but the citation, the public language, the award that came out of that afternoon in 2021. And he read it. He told me later he read it 3 times. He said the 3rd time he read it, standing in the parking lot outside his own barracks, and he had to sit down on the curb. I asked him why 3 times, and he said the first time he was looking for the part where it turned out to be smaller than it sounded, the asterisk, the exaggeration, the easy way, because that was the story he needed it to be. He did not find it. The 2nd time he read it as what it was. The 3rd time, he said, he read it as my brother, and that was the one that put him on the curb. I am not going to pretend that fixed everything between us. A citation is not 15 years. But it cracked something open in him, the scoreboard our father left us. The one Bo had been carrying like a torch. He started to see, I think, that the ruler he had measured me by was the same ruler that had been quietly measuring him his whole life, telling him his worth was a function of how close he stood to the door, and that a man can spend a whole career chasing the top of a scoreboard and still wake up at 40, wondering why the number never makes him feel the way he was promised it would. I had my own work to do, and it was not all noble. There was the leg. The old injury does not care that I made major. On the cold mornings, it locks up, and I have a limp I hide, and a routine of stretches I do before anyone else is at the kennel so that no one sees the major moving like an old woman. There was the voice, too, the one my family installed when I was young. The one that whispers that you do not really belong here, that they're going to find out, that the bottom of the scoreboard is where you actually live, and all of this is borrowed. I would love to tell you that the afternoon with Argo silenced that voice forever. It did not. It just gave me a louder thing to set against it. When the voice starts up now, I think about a dog deciding, on a road, with shrapnel in him, that I was worth dragging into cover, and I think that animal did not get it wrong. Argo does not lie about who I am. So the voice can say what it wants. And there was Cody Marsh, who I had decided to build something with instead of breaking. I started working with him directly, which a major has no business doing with a corporal's day-to-day handling, but I did it anyway, early, before the yard filled up. He was good. He was better than good. He just did not know it yet, and he had the one thing you cannot train into a handler, which is that he genuinely loved the dogs more than he loved looking competent. We had a young dog in the section then, a Dutch shepherd named Pike, who was on the edge of washing out, too much drive and not enough off switch, the kind of dog a frustrated handler ruins forever. I watched Cody not ruin him. There was one morning in particular. We were running detection drills in the training yard, and Pike was having the worst day of his young life, blowing past vines, spinning up, too wired to do the careful work the job actually requires. I could see the frustration building in Cody, the jaw tightening, the leash corrections getting a half-second sharper, and I knew the fork in the road he was standing at, because every handler stands at it, and most of them, at 23, take the wrong branch. The wrong branch is the one where you decide the dog is defying you, where it becomes about your authority instead of the animal's confusion, where you reach for the correction because it makes you feel in control of a thing that is not under anyone's control. I had taken that wrong branch myself once 20 years ago, with a dog named Bruno and a gunnery sergeant named Paula Linden watching. And she had pulled me off the yard by my collar and told me that the day I made it about my ego was the day I should hand in my leash. I never forgot it, so I walked over. I did not take the dog from him, which would have told everyone watching that I did not trust him, and would have told Cody the same thing. I just stood next to him and I said quietly so the others could not hear, that Pike was not telling him no. Pike was telling him he was scared, and over his head, and that those two things look identical from the outside, and are opposite on the inside, and the whole job, the entire job, is learning to tell the difference. I told him to drop the standard for the morning, just one clean find, set the dog up to win one small thing, and then end on it. Because a dog who washes out does not wash out in a day, he washes out across 100 mornings of a handler choosing his own ego over the animal's confidence. Cody looked at me, and I watched him put his frustration down. He set Pike up for an easy find, an obvious one, and the dog nailed it, and Cody rewarded him like he had found a buried tank, and he ended the session right there, on the win, with the dog's tail going and his confidence a fraction higher than it had been an hour before. That is the whole craft in one morning. I told him so afterward. I told him that what he had just done, choosing the patient road on a day when patience cost him and the easy cruelty would have felt good, was harder than anything he would ever do with a bite suit on, and that it was the actual job. I watched the praise land on a kid who had been waiting to hear that he was not the screw-up from the afternoon in the kennel. That is the part of leadership nobody puts on a recruiting poster. It is not the salute, and it is not the moment the room comes to attention. It is choosing, over and over, the patient road and modeling for 12 handlers and a kennel full of dogs. The standard you want the place to hold when you are not there. Transformation is not a single afternoon. It is the 100 mornings after, when nobody is watching, and you choose the standard anyway. I learned that from dogs. You cannot lie to a dog across 100 mornings. They know the difference between the person you are when it is easy and the person you are when it is hard, and the only way to be trusted is to make those two people the same person. Bo started showing up. That was how the trust got rebuilt, not with a grand apology, but with a truck in the parking lot at 0600 and a brother who did not know what to do with his hands, asking if there was anything that needed doing. There always is. In a kennel. There is always a run to be cleaned, a fence to be checked, a bag of feed to be moved. He did the unglamorous work, the work my father would have said did not count, and he did it without making it a performance. And slowly, over weeks, we found a way to be in the same space that did not feel like two boats grinding on a current. We had the conversation eventually, the real one, about our father. We were sitting on the tailgate of his truck after the dogs were down for the night, and Bo said the thing I had waited my whole life to hear him understand. He said he had spent his entire career proving Dad right about what a Marine is, and that he had never once stopped to ask whether Dad might have been wrong. He said it like it was costing him to say, because it was. I told him the truth, which is that Dad was wrong, that the ruler was too short, that there are 100 ways to be a Marine, and only one of them is kicking the door, and all the rest are not lesser. They are just quieter. And then I told him the harder truth, the one I had only recently been able to say to myself. He was wrong, I said. And so was I, for needing him to be right. I spent 15 years angry that he couldn't see me, which meant I was still letting him hold the measuring stick. I was still standing on his scoreboard, just on the part of it that said unfair. The day I actually got free wasn't the day in the kennel. It was the day I stopped needing any of you to recognize the thing I already knew about myself. Bo looked at me for a long time. Then he said that he wished he had been the kind of brother who asked. I told him he could be that kind of brother starting now, that the only version of this that was closed to him was the past, and that the rest of it was still open if he was willing to actually walk through it. He said he was. And then, because we are who we are, we did not hug or weep, we just sat on a tailgate in the dark, not talking, which for the Decker family is practically a parade. Cody passed his certification evaluation that month, a hard one, a no-fooling assessment with an evaluator from outside the section who did not care whose kennel it was. He and Pike, the washout dog, ran it clean. When the evaluator read the score, Cody looked at me across the yard, and I gave him the smallest nod, and that nod meant more to him than a speech would have, because by then he knew I did not hand things out. The praise that lands is the praise that is earned, and he had earned it, and we both knew it without a word, which is the only kind of recognition worth anything. I called Paula and told her all of it, the brother on the tailgate, the kid passing his eval, the kennel running clean. She was pleased in the gruff way she has. And then she said the thing that turned out to be the doorway to the last part of the story. She said, "You let Bo back in." I said I had. She said that took more strength than keeping him out would have, and that people get that backward. They think the strong thing is the wall, but the strong thing is deciding, with your eyes open, who gets to come back through the gate. Then she asked me, because she misses nothing, what I was going to do about the dog, because that was the question, and it had been sitting in me since the first night. Time moves strangely on a base. The days are identical, and the months are gone before you notice. By the time the season turned, the section was a different place than the one I had inherited. The handlers were tighter. Cody had become, no exaggeration, one of the best young handlers I have ever worked with, and he had started mentoring the newer Marines the way I had mentored him, which is how you know a culture has actually changed when it starts reproducing itself without you. The kennel was clean and proud and honest. I was proud of it in a way I do not let myself be about much. And Argo was getting old. I had been watching it happen since the first afternoon, if I'm honest. The gray spreading on his muzzle, the half-second longer it took him to get up off the concrete, the way he favored the leg with the old scar on the cold mornings, the same mornings my own leg locked up, the two of us a matched set of old wounds. He was 7, which is old for a working dog, and the years downrange had spent him faster than a kennel life would have. When the medical review came around, the veterinarian flagged what I already knew. The recommendation was retirement from service. His working life was ending, the way every working life ends, sooner than anyone is ready for. Cyrus Ferraro brought me the paperwork himself. He did not have to. He could have routed it through the system. But he came and put it on my desk, and he stood there, and he said, the retirement board met the next month, and that after that, the dog would need somewhere to go. He said it carefully, the way you say a thing to someone when you are giving them room to make a decision without being pushed. A retired working dog goes up for adoption. First priority, by law and by every decent custom the Corps has, goes to the dog's handlers, the people who served alongside him. Cyrus did not say any of that out loud. He did not have to. He just put the packet on my desk and let it sit there, and he looked at me and then he left. I sat with it for a long time that evening. The packet was open on my screen, the adoption form, the cursor blinking in the first empty field, and I found that I could not type. Not because I did not want him. God, I wanted him. But because the wanting felt almost too large to be allowed, like a thing I had not earned the right to ask for. He had carried me once when I could not carry myself. The question I could not put down was the simplest and the heaviest one I have ever faced. I knew what he had carried for me. What was I willing to carry back? I closed the packet that night without filling it out. Not because the answer was no, because the answer was so completely yes that it frightened me. And I have learned to be suspicious of decisions that frighten me with their size, to let them sit one more night to be sure they are not just the old hunger for something to fill the hole my family left. I let it sit. I lay in the dark with my leg aching and the weather turning somewhere out over the ocean. And I listened to nothing. And somewhere across the base, a dog who had pulled me out of a kill zone was lying on a concrete floor getting older, and I thought, you do not get many chances in this life to carry the one who carried you. You should not need a second night to decide to take one. I called Paula the next morning and told her about the packet, about closing it, about the second night I was giving myself. She listened, and then she said that she had wondered how long it would take me to understand that the dog had been waiting for me the whole time, that he had gone over a latched gate and put his body between me and a stranger, because as far as Argo was concerned, the deal we made on that road had never ended. not for one single day of the 7 years we were apart. She said the only one who had treated it as over was me. He had been keeping the promise alone, in a kennel, getting old, and the question was never really whether I deserved to take him home. The question was whether I was going to make him keep waiting. When she put it that way, there was nothing left to decide. The retirement ceremony was a small thing, the way these things are, held in the training yard on a bright, ordinary morning. The whole section turned out. They do that for a retiring working dog. They stand in formation because the Corps understands something about these animals that the rest of the world is only starting to learn, which is that they are not equipment, whatever the paperwork says. Cyrus read Argo's service record out loud, the deployments, the fines, the commendation, the afternoon on the road, and he did not look at me while he read the part about the road, which was a kindness because I was not entirely in control of my face. And then they called the dog forward, and they called me forward, and I signed the adoption paperwork, standing up in front of all of them, my hand steadier than I expected. I made it official. Argo was mine. The section came to attention, and they saluted the dog, not me, the dog, and I will carry the image of that for the rest of my life. 12 Marines at attention in the morning light, saluting a gray-muzzled Malinois who had no idea he was the reason anyone was standing there, who was mostly interested in whether the ceremony was going to involve a tennis ball. Beau was there. He had taken leave to be there, and he was in civilian clothes for once, a brother and not a staff sergeant, and when it was over he helped me carry Argo's things out to my truck, the crate, the bed, the bag of the specific food the old dog needed now, the toys. He did not make it a moment. He just carried the gear and put it in the truck bed and squared it away. The quiet, unglamorous work that does not count on anybody's scoreboard. And as he set the last of it down, he put his hand flat on the side of the crate for a second, and he said, "Take care of him, Sloan." And his voice did a thing, and we left it there. Some things you leave there. They are bigger for being left. I want to tell you about the first evening at home, because that is the real ending, not the ceremony. I live in a small place off base. Nothing remarkable. That first night, I opened the door and let Argo in, and he did the thing dogs do in a new space, the careful circuit, the nose working, mapping it, deciding about it. And then he found the kitchen, where the late light comes in across the floor in the evening. The same kind of light that had been coming down through the high windows the afternoon he came over the gate, and he lay down in it with a groan that came all the way up from his old bones, and he went to sleep. Just like that. No kill zones, no gates to scale, no protocol to break, no one to protect from anyone. A dog asleep on a kitchen floor in a square of evening sun, safe, retired, home. I stood in the doorway and I watched him breathe, and I thought about the whole long road that had ended on that kitchen floor. I thought about the 10-year-old at the table being told what counted. I thought about the 18-year-old at the recruiting office, watching her father's face go flat. I thought about all the gatherings I sat through, all the jokes I swallowed, all the years of being the number at the bottom that would not move. And I understood, finally and completely, that none of it had ever been a measure of me. It had been a measure of the ruler, and the ruler was too short. And I had spent half my life trying to grow into a length that did not exist. Peace, it turns out, is not the moment the room comes to attention. Peace is a dog snoring on your kitchen floor and a phone that does not ring with people who only call when they want something. And the quiet, settled certainty that you know exactly who you are, and that you do not need a single soul to confirm it, because the one being on this earth who knew you all the way down, who read you correctly when your own family could not, is asleep 10 feet away, with his old scarred flank rising and falling in the last of the light. So if you are out there, and you have been the one who gave everything and got asked, again and again, to prove it anyway, I want you to hear me. You do not have to win the argument. You do not have to make them see it. You do not have to wait for the room to come to attention or the apology to finally arrive in a form you can use. You just have to walk away whole and build a life among the ones who read you right, the people. And, yes, sometimes the animals who knew the truth about you all along. The scoreboard was never real. Put it down. There is a square of evening light somewhere with your name on it, and something that loves you waiting in it, and that, I promise you, is better than any revenge you could ever take. Come here, Argo. Good boy. We're home. If you stayed with me all the way to the end, thank you. Sitting with the whole of it, the long road, the kennel, the dog who never once stopped keeping a promise I thought we had both let go of, I keep coming back to one thing. The ones who see us clearly are not always the people we expect. So let me ask you, have you ever had someone in your own family decide who you were and then never bother to update it? Was there ever a person, or even an animal, who knew the truth about you when no one else would look? And if you had been standing in that kennel that afternoon, would you have explained yourself, or would you have let the moment speak for itself? I would love to read your answers in the comments. And if this story found something in you, hit subscribe and stay a while.